Right, okay, cool, we're ready to start. Before I get properly started, this is a kind of interactive presentation, so what I want you to do is fire up your phones and visit this link, which is bit.ly/MD for multiple device -LJS for LondonJS, which is where we are. There's a counter there, which just incremented, so someone's on there, which is good, because that makes everything else a lot more interesting. Yeah, brilliant, cool. And yeah, the more devices we can get on this, the possibly harder it gets, but more fun as well. So, cool. That at the bottom, so we can see if you're able to connect or whatever. So I'm here to talk about multi-device interfaces, and so we're all kind of like working with the web, and when people interact with web, it's quite a kind of solitary experience, right? So you've got your browser here, and you're typing stuff on it, it's going to the web server, and this part here is quite kind of like lonely and solitary. But there's a couple of ways that we can kind of make that a bit more interactive. And like one way is so we're using like real-time technology, is that you can kind of share your web experience with multiple people and stuff. But with that same, in that scenario, everyone on their own devices is still kind of in that little zone of them and their browser. And I'm going to talk about a few ways to kind of get around that. 44, brilliant. Cool. So I'll start with a couple of examples. This is our Christmas party, and what we did was we played Pictionary. And the way we had this was we had a browser on the projector in the corner, and you could wave a marker around and draw pictures. And that was streamed to everyone's devices, so everyone's phone in the room was could see a real-time picture of what was being drawn, and they could also make guesses, so the guesses would come up here. And what was really interesting about this is, although everyone was technically at a party on their phone, which is like rubbish, the web really augmented the social interaction between people. So it wasn't about being on your phone on a website, it was about this game you were playing with everyone else. And the other instance is when you're interacting with a machine, and so this is like Logic Pro. So when you're interacting with a machine, then you've also got other browsers nearby, like other peripheral devices which also have browsers. And then sometimes in that scenario, you can make use of those in quite a good way. So this isn't actually a web app, this is Logic Pro, and it's got this like sound deck on the bottom. What you can do is you can like drag those like knobs around with the mouse, and you can drag the sliders up and down. Which works, but you can also get a companion app which runs on the iPad. And on the iPad, because it's a multi-touch device, turning stuff is a lot more intuitive, and moving sliders is also just works a bit better. And also because the iPad is a multi-touch device, you can actually slide multiple sliders at the same time, which is something that isn't possible in that original app. And so by taking that off to a device that is more appropriate to that interaction, you're able to kind of have a much better experience with that software. So I'm going to talk specifically about multi-device interfaces with the web, and why the web is important. Why the web is good for this is because there's a really kind of low barrier to getting your devices together as one interface, because you can run on a web browser on your phone or on your tablet or on your PC or whatever. So, right. I've got a lot of demos. I like demos. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up this presentation on my phone, and it's just HTML and CSS and JavaScript, obviously. And this phone's got like a touch interface. So what I can do is I can just go to the next slide, and then these two browsers are in sync. So what I've been able to do there is use an interface on this device which isn't available on that one. And yeah, it's kind of cool. This is a file input field, obviously, and if I was to load that up on my laptop, it would just spin up the file dialog. But it's got some hints on it, so that when I choose it on my phone, I get a camera up straight off. So I'm going to take a picture of everyone. So smile. Sorry, not everyone. It's quite a wide thing. Smile. Sorry, the people in the front here. So yeah, once I choose that, it then streams up over to that device. And like with that interaction, it's like my phone is a very different device from a laptop. So when I, it's got a really nice camera, and it's also mobile, so I can like move it around and get into a better place to take a photo. And whereas like this browser is like connected to that massive projector, so we were able to kind of take these two devices, very different capabilities connected to them, and form one which kind of surpasses them. Right, do I have anything else to say on that? So, right, I've got a bit of code in here because I don't want the whole talk to be like wishy-washy UIs kind of stuff. So it's a bit unrelated and not really to any purpose, but we'll go through it anyway. So this is like the input field there, and all we've got is like a capture camera attribute on it. And what that does, it gives a hint to your device to, if it's got a camera, to use that instead of the file input. And what we want to do is we want to take that, and so we've already got WebSocket connection over to that device, and we want to transport a binary file across a WebSocket. So what we can use is binary.js, which is a beautiful little library that basically wraps up a WebSocket and allows you to send binary data down it, and it will just chop it up so it fits into the fragments of that WebSocket. And so this is the entire code for doing that. So you basically listen for a change on that image, and then just send a file down, and that will just get sent to the server. And on the server side, you've got the binary server, and then when there's a stream on here, you can what we're doing is broadcasting it out to any browser that's listening. Yeah, so that kind of works out. And then on the other side, you just basically gather together the fragments that come through, and then put them all through a blob, create a URL from that, and then you can attach it into your DOM like any other remote URL. So here we're setting the background image to that. This example is up on binary.js under the examples, so if you check that on GitHub, I actually put that example up there, and on the pull request I put this image up there as well, which is on my desk, and doing a bit of like inception photographs. It's a lot of fun. Those are JavaScript powered cars, in case you're into that. So we kind of touched on capabilities of different devices and be able to combine those for kind of something better or whatever. And one of the ways that you can kind of see the capabilities of a browser when they visit your page is to use a modernizer. Like, who's used modernizer here? Just out of interest. Cool. I don't need to tell you about that. It's good. So these are some of the features that modernizer can, like a subset of those features that you can kind of detect with modernizer. And so when you kind of came here with when you visited that URL with that I gave you at the start, the first thing that happened was took a modernizer snapshot of your features, and now we can plot this on this graph here. So this is all the features of all the devices within this room, everyone who visited that URL, and this will update dynamically if anyone else visits. So you've got some gaps here, like CSS transforms and stuff, sporadic full screen API stuff. I don't know. Yeah, a lot of people. It's quite good, I guess. But then we're at a JavaScript conference, so yeah, I guess we're going to have that. So on your own devices, you should be able to see a list of your local features that you have, and that will match up with this a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this a step further, and we're going to look at 4 of these features. Okay, so we've got geolocation, touch events, WebGL, and WebRTC. And what we're going to do is we're going to get feedback from all your devices, well, you actually, and can do stuff with that. So what I want you to do is you'll see 4 sliders on your devices. And they're a bit awkward, you might want to tap them rather than drag them. And what I want you to do is say how experienced you are with each of these 4 features. So we can see some of the kind of things coming in already. And yeah, I don't know, I wasn't really sure what to expect coming here, because it's like, basically we're here because we know JavaScript, and we're also here because we want to learn, right? Like, so it looks like quite a good spread. I guess I'm kind of like middle of the road in geolocation. I've used touch events, but not to any kind of huge depth. WebGL I'm using with like 3JS at the moment, which I'm really digging. And WebRTC, I love that. Like I've read the spec a lot. Yeah, so that's that. Cool. Is everyone good? Right. Okay, so now I want you to say how awesome, so the same slider should be up, and I want you to say how awesome you think each of these features are, like within how you think it will change the web, or is changing, or has changed something. Yeah, so cool, we've got quite high geolocation. I guess that's kind of cool, because that, like, we are all in a place, so that's a good connector. Yeah. It's cool to see this live, actually. It's like I've previously only ever tried it out with like 5 or 6 people, so and they've all lied. So cool. We'll just wait a second. Cool. So now that we've got those two kind of data points, we can kind of combine those together. So this is like awesomeness versus experience, right? So we think a lot of things are very awesome, which is good, and this is like, I kind of think of this as like 4 kind of quadrants. So this quadrant up here is like, we think things are awesome and we know them deeply, which is a great place to be. That's where we can kind of move the web forward and do some really brilliant things. This place is also a really good place to be because we know that something is great, but we don't necessarily know it yet. And it's really super easy to go from here up to there, because if you're learning about something that motivates you, it's super easy to learn and stuff. This corner up here where there's 1 person in geolocation. So that's like, this is crap, but I know it really well. Yeah, I don't know what that means, but yeah, go ye. And then this bottom corner here is like, that's a good place to be because we're all at a JavaScript conference, and so you can talk to any of these other people and learn more and get more excited. Cool. So why do we bother about knowing what capabilities are on different devices and stuff? So this is what we think of as the web. And also on your phones, you've got complementary slides things. So this is what we kind of thought the web was, with like just a desktop machine, and you're interacting with that. Whereas today the web looks quite different. It's like a kind of quite a wide range of different devices. So we've got like phones, tablets, TVs, and each of those devices is kind of able to be used in a different way. Like, I don't know, I use my tablet in the kitchen more than anything else. I don't know how that is. Right. And then where this gets really interesting is where the future of the web will be. So we'll have all these totally different kinds of devices. And in this future, it's like, you don't want to be on your fridge, like filling out a spreadsheet or something like that, or in your car for that matter. And so kind of knowing what capabilities a web browser has is really important to serving the right content and stuff. And these slides are actually about responsive web design, which I think is very related, because basically serving the same content to multiple devices is key to being able to share an interface between those, which is where JavaScript comes in. So I had tons of slides on this, but I thought I'd just describe what actually, yeah, I trashed a lot of slides this morning. So basically, that example that we just did works on publish subscribe using PubNub, which is a kind of like hosted, easy kind of cool thing. And basically, we've got a public channel which all you connected to and submit your features and then your votes on top of that. And my laptop's listening to that. And the laptop was publishing on this slide deck channel so that your devices could stay in sync. And a nice, like, so this is just like a nice abstraction above like WebSockets or something like that. And it's really nice in this scenario because basically everyone's devices here was only sending up a few kind of messages or whatever. This is getting a lot, and then this was only sending out a few messages, and you're only getting a few. So like we're all kind of optimized on the kind of traffic that we're sending up and down, which is kind of nice. Right. So like talking about devices in close proximity to each other and kind of having an interface that crosses those. Transports are a bit of a problem that you've got to overcome. And this is my drawing of the internet. I did this entirely in OSX preview, like copy and pasting screenshots and shit. I was going to get someone to, it doesn't matter, whatever. Right, so basically you've got a web browser that has a kind of changed content, and it's able to kind of make a request up to a web server to have that content changed on that server. And so these two entities know about that change. Whereas because every response has a request, this second browser that comes along doesn't actually, it's unaware that it has to make another request to get that new data. So this becomes a bit of a problem with kind of standard HTTP stuff. So there's a few kind of ways around that. And like the first one's polling. Cool. I'm just going to get a drink of water. Sorry. So the first one's polling, and that's where you just like repeatedly request a resource, and when it updates, you get that change. And that's actually kind of alright sometimes, it'll do, but you've got this obviously overhead of requests, and it's not necessarily real time. The step better than that is long polling, where the server holds on to that request and releases it once that data is changed. And what's nice about that is that can be pretty much real time if you've got sporadic messages, and it doesn't have that overhead of making too many extra requests. WebSockets gets around that overhead of making new requests for every bit of data that you want to get to a client. And that's, yeah, that's particularly good for some reason. I've had a mind blank. Cool. Yeah, so with WebSockets, when you've got two devices in close proximity, every message that you everything you change on this has to bounce through a server and come back onto that other device. So no matter how kind of fat your broadband is or whatever, you're still at the mercy of the physical distance to your server or the slowness of it, even if you're on the same like wireless network or something like that. So that's where WebRTC comes in, because with WebRTC what you can do is you can negotiate a kind of peer-to-peer connection between those two browsers, which yeah, is really important if you've got two devices that are next to each other interacting. So what I'm going to do is, as another example, we're going to send messages from this device to that device. We're going to do it over 4 different methods, right? So firstly, we've got WebRTC, so that's the peer-to-peer stuff. Secondly, through a WebSocket server. Thirdly, via long polling, so the server releases the data when it's changed or whatever. And then fourthly, with a long polling server that's got a purposeful delay to kind of emulate as if it's in a different country or something like that. So if you kind of watch carefully, they'll be in different corners. So what I'm going to do, it's easier if I do this way. So you can see these messages coming in. You can see how the top 2 are kind of streaming in, and the bottom 2 are kind of coming in chunks. And you might not be able to notice it, but the WebRTC messages are coming in a bit more rapidly than the WebSockets one. And that makes all the difference. Like, so not for you, but for me, I can see when I change direction when I'm drawing one of those stars. So, yeah, that's like, we can actually visualize this in a bit of a nicer way. So what we're doing is we're plotting XY coordinates there of the touch events in that original device. And what we can do is we use the Z axis for time instead. We can bring these together and stretch them out by when they're drawn. So basically at the back is when I started, and then they come over to the front. And now that we've got it stretched out in that way, we can actually view it from the time axis and flatten it a little bit. So yeah, this is like a kind of those events coming in through the 4 different channels. If you are doing any kind of real-timey stuff, my biggest bit of advice is not to try and do it through 4 channels at the same time. But yeah, so you can see that the WebRTC and the WebSockets both supported streaming events very well, whereas the other 2 didn't. And as you delay long polling, those messages have to get bigger because in between you kind of making a request and then making another one, more events have kind of arrived in that time. So as the latency gets longer, you just get these like bigger chunks, which kind of sucks. And that wouldn't happen if you have a high latency WebSocket server, because it would kind of stream through. A really interesting thing to notice is that green spot there. So that is the first long polling event that happened, and that came through at pretty much the same time as the WebSocket event. And that's because when you're long polling, when that data is first changed, that response comes straight back, and so it's pretty much the same as WebSockets for one-off events. So sometimes long polling can actually, you don't need to be streaming events and stuff. Yeah, again, I had like 5 slides about the code for this, but I'm just going to give you these so you can work out that yourself. Peer.js is for the WebRTC stuff. It's a really lovely library. Socket.io lets you do WebSockets and XHR polling, but you'd probably more likely go to WebSockets. And 3JS lets you turn stuff around in 3D, which is kind of nice. Cool. Right, so ubiquitous interfaces. So for something to become ubiquitous, it's like something that's kind of like natural for us to interact with technology with. So an example, and this can take a long time, so an example of this is the computer mouse, right? So this was announced in this big demo, and it wasn't until like 20, 30 years later that it actually became something that you accept as a way of interacting with a computer. And so when you're kind of exploring new interfaces with computers, it's tempting to think that it's just like, this stuff seems like it's too far off or whatever like that, but there's a few reasons why new interfaces can be adopted more quickly. So one of them is we've actually been using multi-device interfaces for quite a while. So this is a LAN game called Artemis, which is basically a Starfleet officer game. So you've got the captain in the middle without a computer. They're chasing this fighter or something like that. And every computer here has a different role within the game. So they've got a shared kind of central like system thing. And people, like maybe one person's on comms, one person's on thrusters, shields, phasers, or whatever like that. So yeah, I think this is a really kind of interesting games in terms of interface. And it also looks a lot of fun. Like, so this is a rogue fighter telling stormtroopers how to fly the Enterprise. It's like, yeah, it's kind of cool. Another thing is, so this is YouTube TV. So if you visit that on your browser, it'll kind of, your browser will turn into TV, and then your phone becomes a method of picking items to play, and then it will all sync up and stuff. And the reason why this is instantly intuitive is because it actually replaces a function that we already do. Like, so we all have used a remote control to kind of change a channel or something. And by kind of emulating something that already exists, it allows people to kind of get to grips with it a lot more. So, yeah. Lastly, like, I love this. And yeah, thanks a lot. I've been looking for this for ages. Anyway, yeah, so this is like a little girl trying to use a mouse on an iMac. And why this is relevant is like, so there's another aspect of when computing kind of comes full circle around and it becomes natural again, right? So there's nothing more natural than physically reaching out for something and moving it. And that's when interfaces can kind of start coming back to that, then we kind of intuitively are able to kind of to use them. Which is nice. And so this is an idea of like multi-screen patterns. So this is a few kind of different modes that we can share information between devices and consume stuff. I really like this. Like the one that we're probably all most familiar with is coherence. So this is like taking content and serving it appropriately for each device. So this is like responsive web design or whatever. And these ones kind of talk about different ways of transforming the user's idea of the data between those devices. And then screen sharing is a really kind of obvious and useful one. And we're going to look into that just now. So you probably time to get your devices out again. So before, when you visit that URL, we had 79 people visiting. And as well as the capabilities of each device, I also grabbed the dimensions of the window that you're browsing on. So what we can do is we can actually look at those browsers. Someone's on laptop. Cool. So yeah, one laptop and a lot of phones is all of that. So in a kind of, so when you think of screen sharing, quite often think of a kind of mirrored screen. So maybe all these devices are showing exactly the same image, just resized for them. But when we talk about screen sharing, you can actually, when you've got devices together, you don't have to kind of be limited in that same way. So what we can do is we can lay out all these devices in a kind of virtual space, okay? And what's happened now is I've distributed the location of each device in this kind of map to your devices. So now, like if we display an image across the main space, what you'll see is you should see a kind of snapshot on your device. Are you seeing that? I don't know. Which relates to the particular part of that image. That, so it's kind of, what's happening is your devices are creating a transform matrix, and then you're taking that image and applying that transform matrix to redisplay it on your phone. Is it working? No.
No.
Oh, that's a bad one. Perhaps if you reload your phones, it might help, but maybe not. For no one? Okay, cool, whatever. Right, okay, actually that doesn't really matter so much. Right, it would honestly really work. It was working this morning. So I can actually, so I'm going to add a new device, so this one over here, and everyone else's device would have like updated. So you can kind of see that this is that kind of space up there. It should be the same for all yours, but it's not. But this has got a, what's nice about this is it's got a slightly different connection to it. So it's got a WebSockets connection. So what I can do is I can actually touch this and move this around. And then when I drop, everyone else's devices, if they're connected, would see a new part of that screen. So this is using that same transform matrix, but inverting it and then passing the points back through it so you get the position in the original space. And what's actually quite nice is that when it's back on that laptop, they're actually getting fired as real touch events in that browser. So I've got a bug that basically I can swipe this and it'll take me to the next slide, which is like a kind of really interesting bug to have. Where did I put that? So another thing. So because we're refiring touch events in that browser, what I can do is I can actually connect another device. So you can see these are kind of like that. I don't know, like that. And I don't know why I'm doing like that. What I can do is I can still drag it with this new device. I can also drag it with the second one. So what I've got there is like a kind of inter-device multi-touch gesture. Cool, thanks. Yeah, and I think this really works because, I mean, it's a really nice thing to actually have the devices physically out in their space, and it does actually feel intuitive because it's like you already know what a multi-touch device is, and it's like a small barrier just to kind of cross the device threshold. I don't know. Right. So the kind of like last part of this is which doesn't have a demo, I'm afraid. So taking this kind of stuff forward, it's like helping us move the web forward, like is a really important thing. So this is a game from 1979, which is on the Atari video game console. And games preceding this were like Pong and Pac-Man. And those games, when you're playing it, your concept of the space in the world in that game was the actual screen itself, right? So in Pong, your world was a tennis court, and in Pac-Man it was this crazy maze. And in Adventure, what would happen is like if you were that character and you went off down the bottom of that screen, the screen would redraw and you'd come off the top. And what's really interesting about this is that suddenly the user's their world within that game has just been drastically like widened, right? Like so they're interacting with it in a completely different cognitive way. And what I find really fascinating about this is that it was achieved on exactly the same technology as prior games, and all that had changed was a developer's concept of what an interaction with technology could be. I find that really good, and bringing that to the web is like, there's going to be some stuff in the next few years that's just going to be like crazy good, but also the way that we can kind of purpose the technology that we have today, like the only thing holding us back is the kind of concepts, and if we can kind of work out those, then we can do some really great stuff. So we realize things as a job. So like working with the web. So there's two kind of definitions of realize, and one is to kind of have an idea or come up with something or realize how to do something. And the second is to take an idea or concept and bring that idea into reality. And that essentially with working with the web, that's what we're doing. We're taking these concepts and building them into something. And that's brilliant, right? Like this is a great industry to be in. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that our end goal is that concept, and basically if we're kind of getting caught up on like which library to use or bad syntax or kind of like doing something badly or something, is like that doesn't even matter, you know. All it is about the concept of a person interacting with a page. Cool. So yeah, I'm Benjamin Ben Vauxhall. Yeah, I've got a long handle, I don't know why. I work at White October up in Oxford and down for the day. We also hold JS Oxford, which is like really tiny, but very, very friendly. If anyone feels like they want to come talk at JS Oxford, give me a shout. Yeah, give me a follow on Twitter. Thanks.
Absolutely awesome.
Cool, thanks.
We have got time for questions, and we've got a couple of signed books from Adi Osmani from earlier and some other books. So has anybody got a question they'd like to ask Ben? Yeah.
How do you deal with flaky connectivity?